But joining us at the panel, Michael Kroger, former Victorian Liberal President, Stephen Conroy, former Labor Senator and Cabinet Minister. Stephen, you follow polls as religiously as I do. Why no polls, do you think?
Well, look, they're expensive to do. And so companies have limited resources, whether it's News Limited or whether it's the Channel 9 group of papers. But there's independent polling being commissioned by, Freshwater have done some. Redbridge have done some.
Haven't they? In the last week? I reckon it's a question of do not ask and answer, a question that you won't like the answer to. But less than 2 weeks to go to voting day, Michael, and you've heard the early voters that we showed at the top of the show. Two themes: one, to no to racial division, and two, where are the details, which we've been talking about for ages. What does that tell you about the way the Prime Minister's campaign?
Well, he's conducted this campaign terribly. A permanent change to the Constitution, no detail. He talks about disinformation. Can we have some details of the disinformation? And there's not any of that. But how would the voice operate? That's a very simple question. He's not made any attempt at all to explain how the voice would operate. And when you see that recent decision in the Woodside case, which is in the papers today, that's another reason why people shouldn't vote for the voice. No, he's put in a shocking performance. He's treated the electorate like mugs, as if to say, just vote for this and it's all about love. Well, it's all about love, but if you vote no, you're a racist. And that's another reason why people are not going to vote for this. And they're not going to vote for it in droves, Andrew.
But it's just a basic idea. Later in the show, I'm going to be talking to Peter Baldwin, who's a former Labor minister in the federal government, impressive guy. He wrote a brilliant piece in The Australian on the weekend where he was wondering, why is the left now backing the voice? It used to be very adamantly anti-racist. Now it's switched to thinking yes to racial discrimination if it's for a good cause, supposedly, like discrimination against non-Aborigines in this voice. What do you make of his piece?
Look, I thought it was a thoughtful piece. I mean, it was a sort of argument that I wish more people were engaged in on either the yes or the no side of the case. I think, again, some of the inflammatory language you're starting to see is not helpful for the yes case. I think the yes have got to stop being distracted by, this argument about disinformation. Just stand up and explain how this is going to help the communities, the Indigenous communities, how it's going to empower them. I mean, have that conversation. Well, I said, look, like Collingwood, we were the underdogs going into the grand final, and I think the voice is definitely the underdog right now. And I think if they can just stop responding and getting distracted by the red herrings and just start or continue and increase explaining how this is a positive for helping the communities, whether it's in Alice Springs or it's in Redfern.
Stephen. You can't suddenly 2 weeks out start saying, all those questions have been asking for a year. I've finally figured it out. I mean, I think people tuned out.
Great piece by Peter Baldwin.
But what did you make of it? The question was, we should come back to Stephen on this, when did it become acceptable for the left to actually be for racial discrimination instead of in the past saying no to any differences at all?
So there's a fascist fringe which permeates the underbelly of the international left. And if they can't get what they want, they will ignore and override long-standing principles to achieve something else.
Yeah, but this isn't a fringe. This isn't fringe. This is mainstream.
But it is the fringe. I mean, Marcia Langton is a former Trotskyist, right? Trotskyist. If you don't know anything about Leon Trotsky, look up Leon Trotsky. She was a great admirer of his when she was younger. And they're in a state, people who believe in that type of extreme left propaganda believe in the state of permanent revolution. And so if something's not working, you just morph to the next incarnation of it.
Isn't the Labor government?
But she is a principal architect of it.
To go to the core of Peter's argument, Peter made the argument, and I said it was thoughtful, it was a considered piece, and he made the argument that there were times when you could introduce what you're referring to as racism in reverse. I don't accept that characterisation, but he was making the point. And where he differs from the Voice campaigners, they want to make it permanent in the Constitution. And his argument was there are times when you can put forward policies, and the UN, and he talked at length about the UN Charter and those things.
I'll talk to him later in the show about those things.
But he made that, his core point was where he believed the Voice was off the rails, was that it, and not consistent with left
That's
principles.
one point. But the basic point is this. If you had an advisory parliament called The Voice just for Anglo-Saxon Australians, everyone had said immediately is racist. Now it's for just Aboriginal Australians, and people say, oh, that's good. Oh, that's kind. Or at least the people for it. The point is, when did racism, positive discrimination, if you want to call it, or negative, when did it become acceptable for the left?
Peter's point was that in certain circumstances, for a shorter so I just want to make sure we're arguing about the same thing, because I don't quite take your full interpretation of Peter's piece.
He'll be on the show and he'll have a chance to query it if I've got it wrong.
His piece was you can introduce measures on a temporary basis to overcome past injustice.
He said people could. He didn't say he approved it.
No, but it was consistent with Labor principles and left principles.
When did it become acceptable for the left to be in favour of racial discrimination? Because this is what this is. When? I mean, I don't get it.
No,
I used to work for the Labor Party.
No, that's when I first met you, all those many years ago, when we were much younger and more involved. But the point he was making is where he diverts from support for the voices, it's permanent. Not that you can't introduce a measure. Not that you can't introduce a measure.
You know what I think is going to happen? When it goes down, you will then say, you knew it all along, because I cannot believe that you're in favour of this. This is just disastrous. Meanwhile, of course, the Prime Minister seems so obsessed with the voice, right? And this is, I think, politically very dangerous for him, when there's so many bad signs for the economy. We've got a whole slew of bad headlines just in the last day or today. Economists are warning about El Nino and soaring petrol prices, pushing interest rates potentially much higher. More warnings the government's green energy revolution is in deep trouble. And a leaked internal memo from the Reserve Bank, from analysts there, saying there's a significant jump in even middle-class Australians having financial trouble now, and a lot more Australians, or a jump in the number of Australians relying on credit cards. This is all bad. Where's the Prime Minister on this?
Look, Andrew, this is one of his big problems. That he says, oh, people are concentrating on other things. The bottom line is this: there are people out there whose homes are at risk, who can't pay bills, that can't pay mortgages. When interest rates go from 1% to 5%, that is a massive amount of economic pain, particularly when the Reserve Bank said they'll keep low for 4 years. And so there are people out there in enormous economic pain, and all they see is this Prime Minister talking in vague terms about the voice, without any information, no details, nothing, and telling them, oh, you should vote for this voice. People saying, excuse me, I'm about to be sold up. They can't pay their mortgages, which means they can't provide proper food and clothing and housing for their children and their families in many cases. And it's going to get worse. And they see this guy obsessed with the voice, which is basically because he and Mark Dreyfus wouldn't stare down the extreme left of the Aboriginal leadership.
This is the case.
When Dreyfus went in and said, take out advice to executive government, they wouldn't. And Albanese was too weak to stand up to them.
I need to give you a free kick. Yeah. I want to go quickly to Tasmania, because the Liberals have said, this is our last Liberal government. At least we've got Tasmania. Lost the main. Now suddenly, it's disintegrating spectacularly. The last election, it won 13 seats. There's only 25 in the lower house, so just at a bare majority. Since then, it's lost 3. 2 MPs quit in May because of the process about debt and this stupid AFL stadium they want to spend bitten Mozza on.
Well, look, as long as Collingwood can play in it, I don't mind. But look, they are a shambles.
I should say, the now third one has quit, the Attorney General. Yep. Allegedly because of bullying, which she denies, bullying staff, writing rubbishy emails, destroying her, hoeing into her colleagues, and saying that she was sick of complaints from victims. She says that out of context. But anyway, it's a shambles.
It is a shambles, and it's even more of a shambles because you probably haven't followed Tassie politics quite as closely as me, Andrew, but they actually, in their makeup of their ministry, is a former Labor member, elected originally by the Labor Party, then ran as an independent when fell out with the Labor Party. So the Liberal government's actually propped up by 3 independent Liberals and a former Labor Party member propping up that government. So you've got to say that's pretty shaky territory.
There's something in the water there, because then you've got federally Bridget Archer, a Liberal MP, who seems to vote more with Labor than with the Liberals too. What is happening to loyalty on that island? I do not get it. Stephen Connor and Michael Kroger, thank you both so much for your time.
Go Pies.
One more?
Go Pies.